The first time that it actually became real to me was when I first woke up after the surgery. I realized I couldn't move anything, really. The only thing I could do was lift my arms slightly off the bed. That was really tough for me to wrap my head around. I always used to wonder what it felt like to be paralyzed when I was a kid, and it's unlike anything you can ever experience. It's just impossible.
Welcome to Rehabilitationships, a new podcast from Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation, bringing you real stories of recovery from real patients and real clinicians.
Welcome to Rehabilitationships, a podcast from Mary Free Bed, highlighting the intersection of rehabilitation and relationships. My name is Chris Mills, and I'm your host. We are back for another real story of recovery from real patients and real clinicians. It's another two-part story, featuring Spring Lake resident Spencer Cobb. Spencer was an all-state swimmer going into his senior year of high school when a freak accident changed his life forever. He spent the next 4 months at Mary Free Bed going through inpatient rehabilitation. We sat down with him, his mother Allison, and his occupational therapist Krol on the day before he returned home from the hospital. In the first of 2 episodes, we dive into Spencer's life before the accident, how the injury happened, and what the initial recovery was like. Despite it being a tough journey, we had lots of fun recording this and hope you enjoy the conversation. Let's get into the first part of their story on Rehabilitationships.
Hi, I'm Spencer. I'm 18. I went to high school at Spring Lake, and I grew up in Spring Lake my whole life, and I love it over there. It's awesome.
Allison, you are his mom. Tell me a little bit about your guys' family.
Well, Spencer in general is a character. He's very laid back, very humble and honest. His sister is about 180 degrees from him, so she is wild and crazy and spunky and lots of fun as well. But both great kids, very positive family environment. So yeah, it's really great.
And Cindy, tell me about your role in your job here at Mary Free Bed.
Yeah, I am Spencer's occupational therapist on the inpatient unit here at Mary Free Bed. And what we kind of focus on is starting with the simple tasks such as helping Spencer learn how to become more independent at toileting, bathing, dressing, all of your typical daily morning routine things, and then even beyond strengthening his upper body and getting his fine motor control skills with his hands, engaging back in the activities and hobbies that he was involved in prior to his incident.
So Spencer, high school, senior, almost done. What keeps you busy in your life?
What keeps me busy? I've always been a very active person. I've loved going and hiking, going to the beach, surfing, and swimming in my free time. A lot of that active stuff. I've been more of an active kind of person my whole life.
Sounds like you're a pretty good student, but you're also pretty good athletically. You are involved on the swim team. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I've been swimming for 6 years, I believe, and I love the sport, not just the active aspect of it, but the friends that it brings me and everything that is encapsulated in it.
Has it been fun, Allison, watching Spencer grow into this athlete? Because he seems pretty humble, but he's actually a pretty good swimmer, right?
He's a really good swimmer, and he actually didn't even start until 7th grade, so he hadn't ever been a swimmer prior to that, but by his sophomore year, he had gone to the state competition. He had qualified with his relay team, and he's been at state every year since then. So it was a little bit of a bummer this year that he didn't get to go for his senior year. He had some aspirations for what he was going to do, but yeah, he's worked very hard.
So Spencer, your swim team has really become like your family, right? It's more than just your friends. They're like brothers to you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I love every single one of them. They're awesome.
I had reached out to his friends to help with a lot of the things that were going on as we were transitioning home, and his friends all came.
I told her to ask their moms if she wanted them to come help, because they'll force them.
So I did. I reached out to the moms and said, hey, I need help. And all of the boys showed up. But they were amazing. They were so awesome. Very, very good, hard workers. Got everything done way faster than I expected, and then offered to do like 10 times more of the work. So they were amazing. They are a really good group of guys.
So let's jump into the reason why you are here at Mary Free Bed and why we're all sitting down together. It all goes back to a night in the fall last year. Tell me what was going on that night and why was everybody together?
It was Halloween. We all got together at my friend's house, and we were all just looking to have a good time, and we all had to dared each other, like, oh, I'll jump in the water if you do, like a cold water challenge type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I went in first, and I dove in and broke my neck, and then my friend jumped in and saved me after that, after like a minute of being underwater.
So were you awake and felt this happen?
I was completely 100% conscious, but I didn't really feel the injury because I'm pretty sure the shock just took it away, and I knew what was happening. I knew that I broke my neck. I don't think it really hit me yet while I was sitting there.
Sydney, is that common for people to be conscious during their spinal cord injuries? Have you seen that or worked with patients that way?
From my experience, yes. I've been told that it's a very odd sensation, that they're mentally aware of what's going on, but not sure what they're feeling physically or sensory-wise.
Were you in the water for a while, or did your friends see it right away and come get you?
At first, my friends thought that it was a joke.
Because that's something you would
totally
do.
That is something that I would do, just like hide under the water. But I was under for about like a minute to a minute and a half. I don't really remember that well. I wasn't really counting. But eventually at that point, they jumped in and tried to find me, and they got to me. So.
And they did say, because it was dark, that he wasn't on the top of the water. He was actually under the water, so they couldn't see him at all. So they had to go searching for him to find him. So, wow, very scary.
What goes through your mind at that point? Are you scared? Are you just at questioning what's going on?
I wasn't scared. I could actually hold my breath for a really long time.
Being a swimmer.
Yeah, so I assumed eventually somebody would come in to try to grab me and everything. So I was just waiting it out, and I was just confused, really. I wasn't scared. I wasn't, like, fearful at all. That all came, like, after I woke up from the surgery and all that.
So this has got to be hard for you, Allison. When did you were not at the party.
No.
When did you hear or find out something was wrong?
Shortly after it happened, his friend reached out to me, called me, and he was really calm, and he just kind of very casually said, something happened. We're calling 911 just to be safe, but you might want to head over. And by the time a mom had called me, I was already in my car and, like, on my way there. It was very surreal because I wasn't really sure what to expect. I didn't really know what had happened. All I knew was that something had happened in the pond and they were calling him. But he had also injured himself prior to that at the same place, and it just required some stitches. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. Half the time we kind of laugh off half of his injuries. So I didn't expect it to be what it was. And so there was a lot of very mixed emotions.
That place is pretty bad luck.
For you, most especially.
Yeah. Please don't go back.
What was the first thing? The first time was, what was it? You were skimboarding?
I was skimboarding, and my friend fell off of his, and
he fell off of yours.
No, it shot off out of the water, and it sliced my foot right open.
6 stitches. 6 stitches.
How quick did the ambulance come? Or was it pretty quick? You get out of the water, you get in the ambulance, and you drive away?
I actually wasn't paying attention to that.
The ambulance was there by the time I got there, and I live about 10 to 12 minutes from there.
That's
so
quick.
They were already there when I got there, but they had just arrived. So I kind of was running through the house trying to figure out, people are pointing me in the right direction, and, they're just getting there. So... and Spencer didn't really want to talk about it. He was very confused and he was freezing. obviously from the water.
I couldn't feel how cold I was, though.
Oh, you were pretty cold.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind as a mother when you arrive to the scene and you see your son in a ambulance?
Well, he was still down by the lake where this happened, and he was just on the side, and I really didn't process it. Like, I still had no real understanding of what had happened. They told me they were going to treat it like he had broken his neck because it seemed like he might have, but I didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation, and it was very confusing. Somebody had offered to drive me to the hospital, and I was like, no, why? Like, I'm leaving now before the ambulance gets there, so I can beat them there. But I hadn't even considered that I could have ridden in the ambulance with him. Like it was just very confusing. It was just a very out-of-body experience.
Sydney, I know you're not an EMT, but how quick is response with a spinal cord injury? How important is it?
It's very important. At the start of the scene, nobody's really sure just how serious it is. So it makes sense that they were, treating it as if he broke his neck just for, proper safety precautions. But it's not until, you have the assessments and evaluations done right at the hospital until you get a taste of really how serious it is. So, yeah, a quick response is pretty important because you're not sure how bad it might be.
That's Sydney Krol, an occupational therapist at Mary Free Bed. She's joined by Mary Free Bed graduate Spencer Cobb and his mom, Allison. On this episode of Rehabilitationships, we're hearing his story of recovery following a spinal cord injury. If you're enjoying this podcast, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Now let's jump back into the conversation.
They had some sort of a scan done. They confirmed that he had some sort of a break in his neck. At some point, they called the orthopedic doctor to come in and consult, and they immediately moved him over to get an MRI while the doctor was on his way. Once the results of that came back, he pulled myself and his dad aside, and he just kind of very gently but very realistically said, this is a very serious injury. I'm not sure what exactly is going to happen. The state of his neck right now is such that I don't have to do an emergency operation, but we are going to have to operate, and it will probably be tomorrow. So, I mean, the gravity of all of it was very unreal. Still very much in shock and not sure. I mean, I don't know anybody with a spinal cord injury, so I didn't know what to expect, or I don't know. It was just very, everything just happened very fast.
Spencer, when were you told and you realized, you said earlier that you knew, but when they actually confirmed it and someone told you?
Well, the first time that it actually became real to me was when I first woke up after the surgery. I realized I couldn't move anything, really. The only thing I could do was lift my arms slightly off the bed, and that was really tough for me to wrap my head around. I always used to wonder what it felt like to be paralyzed when I was a kid, and it's unlike anything you can ever experience. It's just impossible.
So you really, when you were a kid, you literally thought that?
I would wonder what it was like.
Really? That's
I'd
random.
hear about people breaking their necks. I'm like, why can they just not move? It doesn't make sense to me. But I didn't understand any of that at that time.
So you have the surgery. Whereabout were the specifics of the break? Do you remember anything about what was fused or any work that they did?
So I ended up breaking C4 through C6 of my vertebrae. They were so bad that the surgeon said they were like sawdust. I don't know how that could have happened, but he said they all popped back into place somehow after the injury. So they went in and they fused, I believe, C4 through C7, I think.
Yep.
And they...
but they had to replace those two.
They replaced
5 and 6.
5 and 6 with carbon fiber vertebrae. And they stabilized it with rods and pins, and they used bone grafts too. And yeah, it was a pretty hefty procedure. to say the least.
Definitely not what I would have ever anticipated.
So how long were you at acute care from the surgery time and before you moved on?
I only was there for a week.
Wow.
Which was very, very fast, I think, to move into rehab. But, I mean, I'm glad that I got in as fast as I did to start my recovery as quick as possible.
Do you remember? And it was kind of interesting because before we even left Mercy, they had PTs and OTs there sitting him up on the edge of the bed and seeing how he could do. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, he just had surgery like 2 days ago. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, is this okay?
It was impossible. And I could only make it for like 10 seconds before I started to feel like I was going to pass out.
They would push you and they would like, 5 more. And you're like, I can, 5 more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why is rehabilitation so important after an injury like this, and to do it quick?
Yeah, a very quick, high intensity, rehab like what we provide here at Mary Free Bed is important because, especially with spinal cord injuries, you're not sure what motor return with an incomplete spinal cord injury. You're not sure what type of motor return or sensory return you're going to get. So hitting the patient hard with therapies consistently is a good way to, enhance that neuromuscular rehabilitation to, make those new pathways from the brain down through the spinal cord column and then down to the legs and the arms, kind of repaving that pathway to get function back.
Did you know that it was an incomplete injury at some point, or when did you find that out?
I don't know when you found that out, Mom, but I remember Dr. Moulton, he's an amazing surgeon.
He's so amazing.
Absolutely amazing. He came in and he told me that I had the potential to have a lot of return, and he didn't know what kind of deficits I may have or how anything might happen, but he told me that it was incomplete and that I could possibly have muscle return.
Sydney, can you explain the difference between a complete or incomplete injury?
Yeah, so an incomplete spinal cord injury is when the spinal column is just severed or nicked. The spinal column is smooth like butter, literally, so it doesn't take much to sever it. And then a complete spinal cord injury is when that spinal column, that little cord, is completely severed all the way through. With a complete injury, you will not have any motor or sensory return, but with incomplete, there's no answer as to how much motor return is possible or sensory return is possible. So that's another reason why fast introduction to the intensive rehab is so, vital.
It took a week before he got here from his injury. Is that common, or are sometimes the starting of rehabilitation a little delayed?
It just depends on each injury. I think that the fact he only spent 1 week in acute, that's pretty short. But I've seen, longer and shorter.
Allison and Spencer, have you heard of rehabilitation or heard of Mary Free Bed before needing it in the hospital?
I was familiar with Mary Free Bed. I've heard just absolutely amazing things. I wasn't really familiar with all of the different things that kind of go on here, which I've only learned since we've been here, but I was familiar with the fact that we had it. I just didn't understand how amazing it was.
What is a first day like for a patient, especially a spinal cord injury patient?
Yeah, from, the therapist standpoint, during day 1, 2, and 3, we're doing evaluations and assessments. We're taking words from a chart from the other hospital and then seeing them and having hands-on with the patient once they get here are completely two different things. So we're trying to get a good picture of where they're starting at baseline, and then we use that information to create a plan on how to get them back to independent life.
A rehab hospital is not just therapy. There's a bunch of different components to it. Why does it take a full team to really assess and work with a patient?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about your own life, there's not just one aspect or one factor that makes you who you are. We have nurses here, doctors. We have the respiratory team, nutrition, PTs, OTs, the whole 9 yards, because we really take a holistic approach at accessing and learning and stepping into that patient's life and figuring all different aspects about what makes them them and how to get them back to being their true self.
You're listening to Rehabilitationships, a podcast from Mary Free Bed about the intersection of rehabilitation and relationships. We're talking with Spencer Cobb, his mother Allison, and his occupational therapist, Sydney Krol.
Go, Sydney.
Go team, right? And
Right.
it's just fun to sit down here and talk together. Oh, I think we got a fist bump coming.
No, he's actually fist
Totally
bumping you.
left me hanging for like 20 seconds there.
Yeah, let the record show that was about 20
she's
seconds.
looking at she's looking at me
20
and not at
seconds.
you, so that's fair.
That's some good arm stability.
Yeah,
You know what I
That's
mean?
right. That's right.
So, Spencer, when you came to Mary Free Bed, were you able to move anything at that point, or what were you at? Where were you at functionally and sensory?
Functionally, what I remember, I was able to lift my arms, maybe not very far. Maybe a little bit of my biceps was still there. I don't really remember.
You
that
couldn't
well.
put them back down though, because your triceps
Yeah,
didn't
my
work.
triceps
So
didn't work
you
at
could
all.
you could lift a little bit, like I don't know. We have a video of that where he just like lifts his arm, and we were so excited. But then he literally couldn't put his arms back down. He'd be like, "Can you put my arms down for me?"
It was like I was Ralphie's brother from the Christmas story. I can't put my arms down.
So I want to step back too. It seems like you just had such a great community response from right after the accident. Can you maybe share a little bit about how the community or the teams or family and friends like stepped in from the very beginning to support you?
It was kind of crazy, and I'm not usually somebody that can accept help very, very easily. But people just immediately jumped in. Spencer was very involved in the community with swimming. He coached rec swimming, and he helped coach the girls' swim team for the high school. And he was like everyone's biggest supporter. And all of a sudden, like, all of them gathered together and they're like, we need to support Spencer. And that girls' swim team immediately made Swim for Spencer happen through Kelly Graftema. And they started selling the shirts and these bracelets and car decals and stuff like that. And then it became that was going to be their conference shirt. And then people put together meals and stuff for us. And then they put together this GoFundMe. And I mean, it just kept going and going. And the more that we spent time with Spencer and realized the severity of his injury, the more I realized how much I needed help, and was just so, so grateful for everything. But so many people reached out. So many people. I can't even explain to you how many people have reached out and just offered themselves. It's just been amazing.
So much of rehabilitation is not just for the patient, but for the family.
Yeah, definitely, especially on the pediatric unit here at Mary Free Bed. We're not treating just the patient. We're treating all of their caregivers, whether that's, close family or friends. We take the whole approach to look at everybody that's involved in that patient's life.
Yeah, I can confirm that. Every time my PTs and OTs would teach me anything, my dad would be sitting right there. And now he likes to call himself a therapist. So that's where it comes from. Dad therapy.
We call it dad therapy, yes.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, you have a job, you have a life, and same thing with Dad. I mean, so how often were you guys at the hospital?
Every night. Every day, all the time. I think the first night that you were ever by yourself was last night.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So
I actually slept the best I've ever slept. Let that be on the record.
Why didn't you do this by yourself?
Let's
no
not talk
sawing
about it.
logs
Let's not talk about
actually
it.
over here.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, straight snoring.
I don't snore.
Oh, really loud too. It's like a train.
Oh,
Spencer,
that is
should we have
not
told
nice.
Sydney? We should have told him that there's an inn that we could have sent her, right?
Oh,
too?
totally.
Oh, what is this?
Right down the hall.
I'm hearing of the inn.
Yeah, so we stayed every night. For the first several months, I couldn't leave. I just could not leave him. It was very, very hard, and I wanted to do as much as I could to help him out.
My dad has also done a lot.
He has.
He's come during the days that my mom can't, and he's taken his weeks and done extra work with me, a lot of stuff. I'm really grateful for both of my parents for being there for me.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's got to be like research that shows on that, where like family that are there to help can make it better for spinal cord injury patients and just patients in rehab in general?
Well, if you think about it, intensive therapy for inpatient here is 3 hours a day. But think about your day. You're awake for more than just 3 hours. The therapy doesn't stop when you're done with the occupational therapist, when you're done with a speech therapist or physical therapist. So we do put a lot of that on the patient and their family members to kind of learn the skills and the exercises that we teach them and do those off hours of those 3 hours a day to maximize their progress.
His dad was really, really fantastic at doing
Very
that.
adamant
were.
about
Very
the
adamant.
extra work.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to his first few days here, from your point of view, Sydney, what were some of the goals and things you were going to try to work through with him? How do you approach a patient like Spencer and make a plan for rehab?
Yeah, so first I was, looking at his body movement, if he was able to move at all. I remember I was asking him to move his arms as much as he could. He couldn't even tolerate sitting out of bed. So we were doing the whole entire assessment from laying down in bed, and he could move, his hand like towards his shoulder, but he couldn't move it back. And so then I, moved his arms myself, which is called passive range of motion. And he was able to tolerate full passive range of motion. And that lets me know that, there's no limitations for what his arms are capable of doing. So now let's take it out of him. Let's see how much he's going to be able to strengthen beyond that. Some of our first goals, they started with learning how to tolerate different positions laying in bed, from laying on your back, from laying on your side, to tolerating sitting upright in bed, to eventually at the edge of the bed without a backrest, to all the way through, all of your self-care tasks, like brushing your teeth on your own, feeding yourself, getting dressed on your own, going to the bathroom and showering by yourself, to doing the more fun, leisure and hobby activities independently again.
Spencer, what was the hardest part physically at the very beginning for you?
Starting off, that was the hardest thing to do. Just because you don't know where you're going to be. You ask everyone, and nobody can give you a real answer of how far you're going to be. What I did is I sat there and I was like, there's a set point that I can get to, and whatever that is, I'm going to make sure that I get to it. So I started working as hard as possible to try.
Allison, what do you remember were like his first big milestones that he accomplished and you think, oh my goodness, we're moving in the right direction. We're going forward. There's hope here.
I think the first time he stood up and was able to put weight on his feet was pretty amazing. There was also before we got there was even there was a tilt table, and we had to be able, before he could stand, you had to be able to tolerate a certain degree of, what is that, upright?
Yeah,
a certain degree being upright. And, he'd make it to about 60 degrees before he'd get lightheaded, because it's just a side effect of having a spinal cord injury, where all of a sudden your blood pressure drops really fast. And
it's harder to regulate your body.
So he had all of this, all of these little steps. I remember Sydney working with him on feeding himself for the first time, and it was very fun. It was in very lighthearted spirit, but to watch him bring the spoon to his mouth and trying really hard. Just his energy and his passion for everything that he did all the way along. It's hard to just pick one moment that was the moment. Every day was little moments all the way along the way.
So Spencer will work with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology. What is the difference? Some people will hear about physical therapy but not know about occupational therapy. What's the best way to describe the difference for people?
Yeah, so in occupational therapy, we focus on, teaching them tips and skills on how to become more independent at all of the activities that you do on a daily basis. Getting out of bed on your own, getting dressed by yourself, using the bathroom by yourself, showering yourself, all the way to walking down the hallways carrying a backpack for school by yourself, being active back in sports, or like we did today, baking cookies by yourself again, playing a game of pool. All these different things that bring you your quality of life, at a higher level. We teach people how to become independent, whether that's, involving the muscles and the strength that it takes to do that, the cognitive aspect, the social awareness and safety awareness, all the different factors that go into that. We kind of target with the overall goal of helping them be more independent at what matters to them.
And that's where we're going to wrap things up for this episode of Rehabilitationships. We'll be back next week to conclude Spencer's story. You'll hear about a bet that Spencer made with Sydney. You'll hear about the progress he's made over the 4 months of rehabilitation. And then we'll check in with Spencer to see how he's been doing since he's been home. Keep an eye on your podcast feeds for the next episode. You're listening to Rehabilitationships, a podcast from Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation. Every month, we're going to share amazing stories just like this, highlighting the intersection of rehabilitation and relationships. Make sure you rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear your feedback and any story ideas you have for future episodes. Send us a note at podcast@maryfreebed.com. If you or a family member or friend may be in need of rehabilitation, visit maryfreebed.com to find out how you can ask for Mary. And with that, I'm Chris Mills, your host for Rehabilitationships. And until next time, thank you for listening and stay well.